Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Wednesday, February the 5th, 2025. Yesterday, Venus moved into Aries, and in this video, I want to consider what it means for Venus to be in Aries with a few example charts. And also, I wanted to look at the whole Venus cycle, or rather, what is going on with Venus between now and June, because Venus is doing all sorts of things. It's just gone into Aries, but it's slowing down, then it goes retrograde, goes back into Pisces, stations again, goes forward into Aries, and in fact it doesn't actually leave Aries moving into Taurus until June. So Venus is going to be doing all sorts of strange things over the next few months, and that is something I want to look at in this video. But first of all, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Wednesday, February the 5th, 2025. And by the way, if you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. So let's see what's happening today. So here is the chart for noon in New York, and you can see that the moon is at 22 Taurus. So moon very much in this sign. No lunar sign changes today, and there are a number of lunar aspects to consider. So moon in Taurus makes a square to Mercury, then it moves on to a sextile of Saturn, and then sextile of Mars, and then a conjunction with Uranus. And it is a first quarter moon. So we had a new moon on January the 29th. That was the start of the Chinese New Year. So new lunar cycle. The moon is waxing, and the first quarter represents, if you like, the first crisis. This is where we start to see this new lunar cycle for what it really is. To begin with, we might have had our doubts. We might not really have known where things were going. But now with this moon square the sun, you've got the moon in Taurus, square the sun in Aquarius, we start to understand. And this first quarter moon may in some respects be a call for action. It took us a bit of time to work out what was going on. We didn't want to commit ourselves, but now we understand. And it's a time where we perhaps need to consider what we want to achieve between now and the next new moon, which is at the end of February, isn't it? So that's really the main thing going on. I think that's probably the most important aspect, the fact that you've got sun square moon. It is the first quarter. And as far as the other aspects are concerned, these lunar aspects I would not regard as being especially dramatic. I mean, moon making a conjunction to Uranus, that might create a few fireworks, but it is in Taurus, and Taurus is an earth sign. It's not known for being overly dramatic, but it can be quite stubborn. So with moon conjunct Uranus, some people may be really focusing on what they want to do, and maybe they won't be too keen to listen to other people. So there could be a certain clash here. Moon conjunct Uranus. Moon having made a square to the sun and Mercury. Not everyone will agree with us, or maybe not everyone is going to agree with us. Sorry, how does it work? Not everyone is going to agree with us, and we're not going to agree with a lot of other people. So agreement today might be hard to find, but I don't want to exaggerate what's happening. We've had a lot of action, and perhaps some of us are still getting used to the fact that Venus is in Aries, and that is the subject of this video. Now we have a planet in a fire sign which stays there. I mean, Venus will be in Aries until March the 27th. and then it goes back into Pisces. So there is fire, there's continuous fire, and of course by March the 27th the sun will be in Aries. So this lack of fire is very much over, and it just may feel in general that there are more things going on. There's more excitement. It's just better to it's a better position for us if we're trying to initiate action. Now Venus, as it moves into Aries, does actually make an opposition to true black moon Lilith. For most of us, we probably won't feel this, but Venus in Aries is not especially well placed. I mean, it is in the sign of its detriment, and with this opposition to true black moon Lilith, that may say something about the quality of some relationships. One tries one's hardest to get on with people, but still there may be something in the way, something from the past, or some hidden resentment. So in terms of relationships, particularly if those relationships are somewhat complicated, or if there have been recent complications, or agreement has been hard to find, be on your guard for something lurking under the surface. And it may just be that Venus opposition true black moon Lilith relates to hidden resentments. And so that is the picture for noon New York, with the moon at 22 Taurus. And if we look at that chart from a perspective of New Zealand or Australia, what's going on sort of noon Sydney time, as a representative of Australasia, the moon is at 12 Taurus. So it's the moon is a few degrees back, and if you are in Australia or New Zealand, possibly the main aspect to really consider is moon square Mercury. So moon square Mercury got the two communication planets in square aspect, and that might mean that communications might not always be easy. When we speak, we might ignore the emotional dimension. That might be one way of looking at it, or we might be too emotional and not be logical about it. But there could just be a disagreement. The words might not quite come together, but it's not dramatic, and I think if we make an effort we should be able to overcome that particular problem. And then there is the heliocentric chart. So this is a heliocentric chart, as always, set for noon in New York, and Mercury is at 7 degrees Aquarius and Pluto is at 1 degree Aquarius. So Mercury is still opposition Mars. Mercury was opposition Mars yesterday. It's still opposition Mars. And, when I discussed Mercury opposition Mars yesterday, I was suggesting that this, might relate to the international arena. People saying stuff. Trump talking about tariffs, and other world leaders saying something back. For example, the former Canadian Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, thinking it might be a good idea to put a 100% tariff on Cybertrucks, on not Cybertruck, all of them, or not just Cybertruck, all of the Tesla cars. I've been seeing a lot of Cybertrucks recently. They seem to be really hitting the road right now. But anyway, that was a suggestion that you might have 100% tariffs on Teslas, as a way perhaps of getting at Elon Musk as well as the United States. So words, politicians saying things. I think China has just put retaliatory tariffs on the US. So that's a Mercury opposition Mars. Gestures, and that's all people can do right now. But I suppose words are maybe better than actions. So that does seem to be the environment, and Mars is still fairly close to the opposition of Pluto. So it does strike me as being somewhat verbal. And that Jupiter square Saturn, which I talked about yesterday, It was exact last week, but we're still feeling it. It's a very Jupiter-Saturn time at the moment. And so that says something about the economy and what people feel about the economy. People still feeling quite concerned and afraid that everything is going to fall apart. But I must emphasize that Jupiter, the Jupiter position, the condition of Jupiter now is starting to improve. Geocentrically, Jupiter is now moving forward, and so that might represent a growing sense of optimism, even if it doesn't feel like it at the moment. Then you've got the issue of Venus, the fact that Venus, the great benefic, has moved back into Aries, and that perhaps provides a counter to Jupiter being stationary. And we do perhaps have to consider Venus when looking at what's happening in the world. But that's something I'll be considering later on in the video. And now it's time to look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. Aries. Aries, I hope you are enjoying Venus moving into your sign. It does represent a real change, I think, and I hope, because it's fire, and you have some inspiration now. You've got something to inspire you, and now if you're able to take the initiative, I think that you can do it. You just have the energy to see things through, and it's not just about you; it's about other people. Recently you may have felt, Aries, that you were somewhat unsupported. You might have wanted to get things moving, but where was the support? Where was the inspiration? Other people just preferred to be doing something different. And now you are getting that support slowly, but I think in general you feel that there is a little more sympathy. And when you speak, when you suggest things, your audience is more willing to listen to what you've got to say. Though Venus is making an opposition to true black moon Lilith. Venus at noon New York time is at 1 degree Aries. True black moon Lilith is at 1 degree 7 minutes Libra. And that might mean that under the surface there could be a little bit of unpleasantness. Now, it could be that some people are hiding things. You have what you see on the surface. People suggesting that everything is fine, nothing to worry about. People are being sort of cooperative, enthusiastic. But deep down, someone is resenting something, and you're kind of aware of it. And it might be a good idea to think about, what that resentment is about. It might represent the past, something that happened a long time ago, or it's just a general unwillingness. People are concerned about power issues, and they don't want to give too much away. So there might be a feeling, Aries, that people might be more cooperative, but are they giving 100%? Maybe they're giving 75% or only 50%, and they're dragging their heels on some particular issue. And deep down, it might be a question of resentment. And it's not that you have to take it totally seriously, that you have to spend all your time trying to work out what people are thinking, what people are feeling. Maybe you just have to just carry on as if nothing is going on. And I don't think it's a good idea to necessarily discuss what you feel, to discuss your doubts. I mean, you are an Aries, you like to be upfront, but if you're completely upfront, you might actually be making matters worse. And so just focus on what can be dealt with, and don't make things unnecessarily complicated. And with this Venus opposition, true black moon Lilith, just consider the possibility that you might be exaggerating, or even that you might be projecting, because in astrology, the seventh house is about what we project, it can be, what we put onto other people. And Libra kind of represents your seventh house, because Libra is a sign opposite Aries. So there might be some possibility that you project some of your inner frustrations and even fears onto other people, and it may not be entirely realistic, or real, and you might be imagining it. So Aries, do get the balance right, and at the same time, this true black moon Lilith is quite subtle, and I don't want to exaggerate it, and maybe I shouldn't be looking at it. I don't know what your views are on true black moon Lilith, but do consider it, and at the same time, Mars is continues to be moving retrograde. Mars is your ruler, and Mars continues to be square Chiron, and that Mars square Chiron probably needs to be seen in the context of Venus moving into Aries. With Venus moving into Aries, forget the fact that it's Venus. It's just a planet moving into Aries. So with this it's a personal planet moving into Aries, gives you more energy, gives you more fire, and with Mars squaring Chiron, and Mars has been squaring Chiron for a couple of days. That does give you perhaps the impetus to do things differently, and to show the world that really things have changed. In the recent past, you might have been holding something back. You may not have been firing on all cylinders, but now you want things to be different, and you are not happy with the way things have been in the past, and you want to get noticed, and your job is not to make everyone happy. Your job is not just to fit in. Turning to relationships, and there could be something we could say about Venus opposition true black moon Lilith, and one could go on about that, but putting true black moon Lilith aside for one moment, with Venus moving into Aries, it is about someone finding you interesting, maybe more than one person finding you interesting. There is something fundamentally charismatic about Aries, because people want action. Maybe it depends on society and culture. I always think, maybe you disagree with me, but in the UK, if you're an Aries, you just have a natural advantage. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it's just in the UK, in the Ptolemaic system, the UK is an Aries country. The far signs, it's a very Eurocentric system, astrology and geography nearly 2,000 years ago, but Northwest Europe was sort of ruled by the far signs, and England, British Isles, well, I think to an extent British Isles, certainly England. You could say, well, Ireland is relates to Taurus, and Scotland Cancer, but of course Ireland would be Taurus because it's the Emerald Isle. But there is something Aries certainly about England, and so if you're in England, then maybe you get special attention. People like you even more. But in general, it is a time, when you are more charismatic than usual. As I said, in general, Aries is a charismatic sign, and your charisma is now very clear, and you have what people have been looking for. They felt that it was missing, and you definitely have it. And this means, in terms of relationships, that you are almost magnetic. You're the one that can make things happen. That does put a lot of pressure on you, and you can't be the one who is responsible for everything. And in terms of relationships, you've got to consider what the other person wants, and it can't always be you taking the initiative, you providing the action, you providing the fire. And maybe you have to sort of try to encourage other people to be inspiring. You can't be the only inspiring person on the planet, can you? Taurus, Venus continues to get a grip on the sign Aries, and as I was saying yesterday, Venus moving into Aries is a bit of a mixed blessing, and perhaps the most important positive thing about Venus moving into Aries is that Venus is in a fire sign, and sometimes Taurus can be a little bit what's the word? Phlegmatic, maybe. Not saying much, just doing what they feel is doing what they feel matters, but not going further from that, and perhaps lacking that spark. But that spark is now there with Venus moving into Aries, and that might mean that you do have an opportunity to get attention, and the things you say could be more dynamic than usual. And so from a communication point of view, Taurus, you have a clear view of what you want, what you believe in, and you're able to say it, and in most cases people are going to listen to you. But do be careful what you say, because Venus is making an opposition to true Black Moon Lilith. And this true Black Moon Lilith might have an impact on you. I mean, it doesn't always work, true Black Moon Lilith, but there may be something about you that is a little bit resentful, something you resent. You're not fully able to express it, but it bothers you, and maybe you're concerned about someone else's behavior or what someone's done in the past, and that might mean that there could be an inconsistency of approach. You could let things build up and everything seems to be fine, and then you might do something or say something that is just not right, and you get your timing completely wrong, and you might be saying something out of frustration. I mean, that is possible. So if there is something bothering you, and it could be the case, I mean, you just might feel that something isn't right, and you actually want to say something, and what you say, it just might come over in a way that is rather clumsy. So there is a bit of negativity there, or at least a potential for negativity, but I don't want to exaggerate it. We shouldn't forget that the moon is moving through Taurus, and it's a time when Taurans can have a great sense of who they are and what they want to achieve, and also it is a first quarter moon. Moon is square the sun. Sun in Aquarius is squared by the moon in Taurus, and this first quarter moon, as far as you're concerned, is something I would regard as being very fortunate and motivating. You really do have a sense of what you want to achieve, and it's very clear, and you don't have to question it, you don't have to analyze it, it's actually obvious. And it's not a situation where you need to be supported. It's nice if you get outside support, but I don't think it's essential. I think it's a situation where you can just plough forward in that inevitable Taurean way. Once Taurus starts moving, it just keeps moving and it keeps moving until it gets to where it wants to go. And you're maybe helped by the fact that Moon is conjunct Uranus. Though, remember what I just said, that there is some danger of not inconsistency, but not being constant. Suddenly changing everything because you want to blurt something out, and that might be Moon conjunct Uranus. You want to force the pace, and there could be a little bit of resentment here because Venus is opposition true black moon Lilith. So Moon conjunct Uranus just might encourage you to say something or do something which is just out of sync with everything, and it might get a negative reaction. Though it could be the right thing to do. I mean, there's nothing wrong with causing a little bit of drama with that Moon conjunct Uranus, and you can get noticed, and people will take account of you, but you don't have to overdo it. That's absolutely unnecessary. You just have to be yourself, and it will work. And if you push it too far, if you're too desperate to get attention, that might backfire. So, Taurus, keep going with whatever you're doing. If it's constructive and positive, just keep going with it. And if you do that and you don't overanalyze other people, don't worry too much about what's going on in their minds and what their motives are. Just keep going in that inevitable Taurean way, and you'll reach your destination. Gemini, the moon is making a square to Mercury, and this moon square Mercury could well be about communication. The moon and Mercury are both communication planets, and it's fine if communications are taking place on an entirely verbal and intellectual level, but the moon is a planet that has an emotional quality to it, and so what you don't want to happen is emotional and intellectual communication to get mixed up. Ask yourself, what actually are you trying to achieve? And if you can just concentrate on the facts, then it should be fine. But if you allow emotion to get in the way and your feelings to engage with the facts, then things could start becoming complicated, and it may be difficult for you to be entirely objective. And for Geminis, it's very important to be objective. And so don't say anything unless you've really thought it through, and just don't allow your emotion to make you say something. It may just be a one-word comment, a couple of words, which could just be really offensive, and you'll know you shouldn't say it, but you just say it anyway. And once you've said it, it's too late. You can't really take it back. And also, remember the heliocentric picture. Mercury is opposition Mars. That Mercury opposition Mars it was exact yesterday, but it's still very much in the air. And with moon sextile Mercury, it could be particularly strong. It could really encourage you to cause offence. That's going to be especially the case if you're in Australia or New Zealand, because around sort of noon or Sydney time, but sort of middle of the day in Australasia, that moon square Mercury is pretty exact. If you're in the Americas, I don't think that moon square Mercury is going to be such an issue, and instead it may be more about the moon making a sextile to Saturn, and with moon sextile Saturn, because moon is making a sextile to Saturn, then it makes a conjunction to Uranus, and that moon sextile Saturn gives you a certain amount of responsibility. You understand what you are trying to achieve, and you also understand that if you say the wrong things, that's going to get in the way of your progress. And it may be that in the Americas it's just easier for self-interest to cut in and just prevent you doing anything too wild, too careless. Though Gemini, you still have a need to be different and to be a rebel. Though, is it really necessary to tell people about it? There is this moon conjunct Uranus, but the moon conjunct Uranus is quite private. And so if you have strange ideas, or you want to do things differently, or you want to make a break from the established system, to begin with, it might be best to keep it to yourself. And additionally, it may be hard for you to work out exactly what is going on emotionally around you. You can feel that something is maybe not right, or you're trying to make sense of it, and you're trying to make assumptions in terms of other people's behavior. You're trying your hardest, but it's difficult, and it may be a case where you're trying too hard to work on an emotional level. And Gemini, if you try to be emotional, it sometimes just doesn't work, and you focus on the wrong cues. And in terms of other people, there is a real danger that you do reach completely the wrong conclusions. So if you find yourself having thoughts about anyone and making decisions about someone, I wouldn't take it too seriously. You're still trying to pick up information, and you're still trying to make up your mind, and you haven't got all the facts at your disposal. Even if you did have all the facts at your disposal, there's a good chance that you would get it wrong, because you'd emphasize one set of facts, the wrong set of facts, and you would discard the details that are really important. So especially in your social life, it's very important that you don't come to any firm conclusions. Cancer. The moon is going to be in Taurus all day, and with the moon in Taurus, it's probably a time when you can be quite sociable, when you can enjoy other people's company. And if you make a little bit of effort, you can come over as a pleasant person, and people will respond to you very well. Though it is a first quarter moon, so we had a new moon on January the 29th, and this new moon on January the 29th, beginning of the Chinese New Year, might for you have been a little bit challenging. It might have made you perhaps a little more sensitive than usual, aware that you are living in complicated times, and there's a lot to work out. There's a lot to work out for all of us. It's not just a Cancer thing. And so you're trying to work it all out, and that's what the new moon has been. It relates to. And now you've got a first quarter moon. So first quarter moon, in a way, is a first challenge. It's a challenge to maybe just take action. You've been observing things over the last week, and now things are becoming clear, and you have to decide, what you're going to do. And what do you want to achieve between now and the new moon, there being a new moon at the end of February? So what is it? What do you want to do? And so that is a challenge. And the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus, and with this moon conjunct Uranus, you realize that things aren't the same. If you go back a month, or certainly back to 2024, you realize that things have changed, and some people are not changing. They're behaving as if everything is normal, and you know that something has to shift, and you would prefer not to have to do anything dramatic, but you might feel that there is no choice. So in terms of other people, yeah, you can get on very well with other people with this moon, with the moon in Taurus. But moon conjunct Uranus, at a certain stage, you may feel that you have to take a stand, and you might sort of reluctantly make the decision that you have to create a little bit of tension. May not be what you want, but you actually feel that it is necessary. Now, something else that's happening, yesterday is we had Venus moving into Aries. Venus is still in Aries. I think right now you're really starting to feel the impact of Venus in Aries. And Venus in Aries for you, Cancer, is about getting attention, being noticed, and being aware also of how you're being noticed. You see it. You get an idea about how people are perceiving you. And that's why I said yesterday that there might be a little bit of vanity creeping in. And the reason vanity might be creeping in is because you're just aware of how you are occurring. And this is why I said that Venus moving into Aries could be about mirrors and what you look like. And while vanity is not something one should encourage, still how you are occurring does matter. And with Venus in Aries, you are certainly able to get noticed. And Venus in Aries, it's not an entirely favourable in general, because Venus doesn't work especially well in Aries because it's in its detriment. But I do think in your case, Venus in Aries, it's fine. It's a change, and it does make you a more exciting person, and you come over as just more interesting. You've got a buzz about you, which I think in many cases will be appreciated. But just consider the possibility that there are things happening under the surface that you don't really want to address. But Venus is making an opposition to true Black Moon Lilith, and so Venus opposition true Black Moon Lilith may be about some people not being entirely open and honest, perhaps focusing on surface appearances. Everything is fine on the surface. Let's smile, let's be happy. But deep down, with Venus opposition true Black Moon Lilith, something is not being revealed, is being hidden, and it might be quite dark. It's not your problem. I must emphasize that. It's not your problem, but it's still there. And so do make a special effort to understand what that true Black Moon Lilith is all about. What is motivating people, what is holding people back, because there is something there. And maybe you can benefit from this if you're aware that things are more complicated than they seem on the surface. Then you can take appropriate action, and in the end that will be making yourself stronger and more protected. Leo, you have a certain sense of right and wrong, how things should be done, and you don't really want to be contradicted. And in many cases, Leo, you aspire to be something of an authority figure, because you know best. You have a certain amount of wisdom. I think that your wisdom is reasonably clear. I'm not saying that you're totally wise in all areas, but you have a certain amount of authority that I think it will be respected. And you might not feel that you've got much authority. I mean, it depends on your exact situation, but it won't take much to get respect. And if you want to be ever so slightly judgmental, then I think you can be. Obviously, you don't want to take it too far, judging people for the sake of it, but just being a little bit judgmental might just be quite good for you and the way you present yourself. And sometimes a judgmental approach is in demand, because people don't know what's right, they don't know what's wrong, but you actually do know what's right and wrong. And that means that if someone is doing something that is not right, or that they don't know the facts, they don't know the rules, you'll be the perfect person to put them in their place, and you are likely to get attention over the course of the day. The moon is in Taurus. The moon is making a conjunction to Uranus, and so that moon conjunct Uranus could be, Leo, about you telling the world who you are, and you have something about you that is different, and that is respected. It may not always be liked, but it's probably appreciated. And so if you have a view of the world which is at all sort of unique, and you have something different to offer, then don't be afraid. It is a time to explain to everyone who you are and what you want. And remember, it is a first quarter moon today. So with first quarter moon, you've perhaps been thinking about what's going on, what you're supposed to be doing over the last week since a new moon on January the 29th. And now is a time for action and making it clear that there are things you want, and you want them as soon as possible. Now, that might mean that there is a certain clash between yourself and certain other people, or maybe it may not be other people, it may be established norms, that you have to do something different, and it's not always going to be welcome. But sometimes, Leo, you just have to take a stand, and you'll be very good at explaining yourself in a way that is authoritative. You'll give the impression that you know what you're doing, and you'll have a sense that you are wise. And if you are confident in yourself, then I don't think that you will be seriously contradicted. Though if you are working, or you have a job, or you're having to deal with society, don't expect everything to be completely fine. You can't expect that. You should recognize that some things are being hidden. People don't want to talk about it, but it's important. And you shouldn't look at things in terms of what they look like just on the surface. There is an opposition aspect today between Venus and true black moon Lilith, and I think that this opposition between Venus and true black moon Lilith does indicate what is being hidden, what people are not prepared to talk about, they don't want to talk about. But maybe, Leo, you should demand that people are open and honest. Yeah, you can make demands, because as I said, at the beginning of this piece, there is something about you that is authoritative. And so if you are an authority figure, I mean, even if you're not an authority figure, you get respect. And if you ask for something to happen or ask for something to be explained, then I think in most cases you'll get what you want. And so don't be satisfied with something which is not perfect. And if you just get that feeling that something is wrong or something is hidden, then be open about that feeling. And I think in most cases you'll get the answers that you're looking for. Virgo, it's important to be open-minded, not to restrict yourself in any way, and realize all the things that are possible. And it's especially important now because over the last few years you've had you've quite a few years while Uranus has been in Taurus. It has been a time of exploration, or at least it should have been a time of exploration. Maybe it wasn't, but it certainly should have been. And with Uranus moving through Taurus, you were getting, hopefully, new insights into yourself, into your direction, and also into the world at large. And I'm hoping that you were learning more about yourself and your overall destiny. And there could have been a spiritual dimension to Uranus in Taurus, hopefully, and perhaps you had a better understanding of your relationship with the planet. And Uranus is not going to stay in Taurus forever. This year, next year, it starts moving out of Taurus into Gemini, and Uranus moving into Gemini will represent a new set of challenges. In fact, I think Uranus moving into Gemini could be very good for you. But with Uranus in Taurus and the Moon now making a conjunction to Uranus in Taurus, it is a time to rethink things and ask yourself, have you made the most of it all? And Moon conjunct Uranus may be about a surprise realization. You perhaps start to see that things are sort of more complicated than you'd realized, and also that you haven't got all the answers. And so think about possibilities, and if there is a little bit of a shock or a surprise, don't turn away. Surprises, in most cases, should be welcomed, because surprises are a way of moving you forward quickly, and fast action is just a way to have accelerated development. And that's what you want, isn't it? And getting an insight, even if it's a surprising, shocking insight, is something that you should welcome. And this means, Virgo, that you should try to be as open-minded as possible. But you need to be open-minded in such a way that you're not drawing firm conclusions, because there is a lot of information coming your way, and other people are actually presenting you with a lot of information. And I'm thinking particularly of emotional information. There's a lot to take on board, and it's easy to be overwhelmed. And it's most comfortable to reach a conclusion. So if you're overwhelmed with information, and if you're overwhelmed by emotional inputs, one approach, the easy approach, is to say, well, I can't process all this. I'm just going to reach a conclusion. I'm going to decide that it's all telling me one thing, and that's the way it is. I can draw conclusions about other people, I can draw conclusions about the world, and I don't have to think about it anymore. But now is not a time for drawing conclusions. If you make a conclusion, it's very likely that it is the wrong conclusion. And it's not that there's anything wrong with you, it's just that things take a little bit of time. And so you have a surprise. It's good to have a surprise, but when that surprise happens, try to take it in your stride. Don't reject the surprise, but don't think that any particular surprise is the final answer, because it's not. And it's very often the case that you have to just look deeper into things. And for many people today, it is a good idea to look deeply into things and not to just turn away if they seem complicated. And one reason for that is that we've got Venus opposition true black moon Lilith. So with Venus to opposition true black moon Lilith, you could so easily see something that just seems just too complicated for you, a person who seems too complicated for you, and you just don't want to know what's going on under the surface. But with Venus opposition true black moon Lilith, be prepared to sort of go deeper, to ask questions. I mean, not necessarily ask questions of another person, but ask questions of yourself. What is it? What is this complication that Venus opposition true black moon Lilith is about? Because with true black moon Lilith, it's going to represent something which is fairly hidden, and the more hidden it is, the more twisted it could become. And it may be a principle that you have to strive somehow to bring out into the light. And when you bring something out into the light, not just today, but over the next few days, and as I said, it's not time for drawing final conclusions. When you bring something out into the light, it all becomes so much easier. Libra, in many respects, it is a complicated day. I mean, it's a complicated day for a lot of people. It's not just you. I've been talking a lot about Venus opposition true black moon Lilith, and Venus is your ruler. It's in Aries, powerfully placed in Aries, and opposition true black moon Lilith, that could represent things which are hidden. And right now, you don't want things to be hidden. You want things to be absolutely straightforward and above board. That's Libra, or it can be Libra. Wanting things to be civilized. Again, that's quite a Libran trait. You just don't want complications. Let's keep things civilized. But with Venus opposition true black moon Lilith, things might not be particularly civilized, and you'll soon become aware of things that are complicated, and they're also disturbing the balance. And of course, as a Libran, you don't want things to disturb the balance, but they might well. So Libra, perhaps you need to think about what that actually is. And true black moon Lilith is in Libra. So with true black moon Lilith in Libra, that may actually say something about you. And it may be that, fundamentally, things about yourself are quite complex, and you see things in a way that is a little bit unusual, and things from the past might be close to the surface. And if you're honest with yourself, you may accept that you are slightly preoccupied. And so with Venus opposition true black moon Lilith, we might have a situation where you are trying your hardest to be nice and to be balanced and for everything to be civilized. You try your hardest, but there's something about yourself which is almost sabotaging it. And you're not fully prepared to let go, and you want to hold on to things, and maybe that's right. Maybe you should be holding on to things, but it does make things a little bit complicated, and you shouldn't you shouldn't assume that anything is going to be simple, and if things are not simple, you shouldn't assume that it's another person messing things up. It could actually be you messing things up, because right now, Libra, you're probably more complicated than usual, and it's made more intense by the fact that we have the moon in Taurus. The moon in Taurus is a sign which doesn't fully relate to Libra. Taurus and Libra, okay, they're both ruled by Venus, but Taurus and Libra represent very different aspects of Venus. The Libra aspect of Venus is more sort of positive, more about relating, being civilized. That's one aspect of Libra. The Taurus aspect of Libra is more earthy. It's more grounded. It's more complicated in the sense that it's more personal, perhaps. I suppose Taurus, in a way, is a more personal sign than Libra. And so, with the moon moving through Taurus, you are taking things personally, especially as the moon is making a conjunction to Uranus. You're very aware of your own view of the world, and your view of the world is somewhat complicated, and you are capable of actually being quite defensive, and you kind of feel that you shouldn't be defensive, and you feel that you should be more accommodating. But is that the right approach for you at this moment? Probably not. So your first task, Libra, today is just to understand yourself, and understand what kind of person you are, and get a grip on the complexities in your life, and don't wish them away. They are part of who you are, and if you try very hard to be nice, and if you make a special effort to be nice and civilized, it's probably going to backfire. And so, if you make the assumption that things are difficult, that things are complicated, then possibly that's the best way of managing the day's energies, and that does indicate that you're the one potentially creating the problems. And what is creating the problems is you maybe trying to pretend those problems don't exist. But if you accept who you are, accept that nothing is perfect, and accept the full power of your feelings and the more complicated and darker side of your feelings, then things should be fine. Scorpio. Moon continues moving through Taurus. Taurus is, of course, your opposite sign. So, like it or not, there may be a certain emphasis on relationships, or should I say continued emphasis on relationships. And the moon moving through Taurus is starting to make a conjunction with Uranus. So moon making a conjunction to Uranus can be about something happening that you weren't fully expecting, at least on a conscious level. And so if things happen, you might be of a view that really it's other people are not behaving as expected, and other people are just making things just more complicated than they need be. Though there is a danger here that you are projecting. That moon Uranus may represent a principle that you're just not owning, and you're just projecting it onto other people. It may just be about you at some level wanting change, but you don't want to change on a conscious level, so that change is being imposed upon you. And maybe other people, and not just other people, but the world at large, through its strange behavior, through the surprises it's through the surprises that they bring, through those surprises, you're being told what you need to know. So if something happens that you weren't expecting, then that just might be a sign that you haven't been moving fast enough, and that you need to make a greater effort to embrace change. And also this is happening at a time when Mars is square Chiron. So Mars has been square Chiron for the last few days, and this Mars square Chiron has been quite stubborn. It's just been around. It's because Mars is moving quite slowly. So normally Mars would move a bit faster, and this Mars square Chiron would not continue for very long. But it is around. And Mars square Chiron, it's about doing things differently and wanting to do things differently, and not being happy with the way things are. And it is a challenge. And perhaps the challenge is to be unique, and to almost break the rules. I mean, not break the rules in a sort of legal sense, but break those expectations that are being placed upon you in terms of behavior. And by doing things differently, and by attacking routines which have just gone on for too long. They're no longer interesting, they're no longer useful, they're perhaps even holding you back. And with Mars square Chiron, you can start to sort of overturn things. And so that would mean that if you are refusing to embrace change, that is another reason why other people might be messing things up for you. It may not be that they're deliberately messing things up for you. It's almost like other people could be the tools of your own destiny. And it does seem at the moment that things do need to be shaken up a bit. And really, Scorpio, that's something that you should welcome. Now, continuing on the theme of relationships, Venus is opposition true black moon Lilith, and Venus is perhaps representative of another person or a couple of other people. And with Venus opposition true black moon Lilith, that may represent the complications in another person's life. I mean, true black moon Lilith is dark, and okay, it could be creative. It's often seen as being creative. I mean, whatever, the dark side of the feminine, however you want to see true black moon Lilith. And it's something that is not being acknowledged. And some people, maybe people very close to you, are not acknowledging things about themselves which perhaps they're not proud of, perhaps they want to keep secret, but it's still having an impact on their behavior and perhaps on the things they say. And that may also link with the moon conjunct Uranus. So if we've got moon conjunct Uranus and Venus opposition true black moon Lilith, then you might have a situation where some people are just revealing who they really are through one-off comments, perhaps through their body language, but something is being concealed here. And some people's behavior is being influenced by the past. And Scorpio, it might then be a time when you need to use your sensitivity and your emotional power to really sort of get a sense with what is going on. But it's not a situation where you have to panic or feel you're dealing with something horrible and demonic. It's not like that. It's about understanding what is bothering people, and the more you can understand it, the better you're able to do something about it. Sagittarius, you possibly feel that there's not a great deal that you want to do. I mean, astrologically, I would have said that it's not an especially dramatic day. A lot of the excitement is in the past, although we do have Venus moving into Aries, and that's something that you need to be aware of. I think Venus moving into Aries is overall very fortunate, and it allows you to, tune into who you are, what you can do, what you can create, and it, Venus in Aries, Venus is moving into a fire sign, so that does give you inspiration, and it allows you to make connections, perhaps connections which weren't there before, but still, looking at the day in general, there just doesn't seem to be a great deal of action. And it might then be the case that you need to just accept the situation and perhaps be glad that there isn't much happening. Because with the situation where not a lot is going on, you have a chance to get your bearings. There are some things going on that you just don't understand, that you're still trying to work out, and perhaps you can just sit back and perhaps work out where your own shortcomings are. So if you have a feeling that you've got shortcomings, then now is a time when you can very much do something about it, and there won't be a great deal of pressure. Certainly not from the outside. I mean, you can create your own pressure if you want to, and if you want to make something, then you certainly can. And if you want to use your energy in your own way to create something in your world which is useful. It may be about forging the tools that you need in the future. I mean, you one symbol that sort of might come to mind could be like the blacksmith who is creating, I don't know, whatever needs to be created, axes, farm equipment, whatever blacksmiths used to create, and they're not being used at the moment. They're done in a quite private way. You have your own sort of private forge where you are forging equipment which you will soon need. And so that is an image that comes to mind. And the blacksmith does not need a lot of help. The blacksmith has got everything that they need. And you have to, do it carefully and be thinking about the future. And also, that Jupiter is moving stationary direct, and with Jupiter moving stationary direct, things are getting better, and you have that intuition that things are coming together, and you shouldn't need to see anything tangible, not yet. It's enough to know it. Not believe it, but just to know it. It's just enough to know that it's all starting to work out. And in order to really get into this feeling, it's probably best that you're not surrounded by people. If you're just surrounded by people, the message will get diluted. Now, I talked about this imagery of a blacksmith, which is great, but if you are literally doing stuff like that, dealing with fires and furnaces, and I'm sure you're not, but if you happen to be, then the moon is conjunct Uranus in Taurus, so don't take risks. And with the moon in Taurus, you probably want to make sure that you spend some time looking after your health. With the moon in Taurus, one kind of thinks of a throat, doesn't one? And so your throat may be a little more vulnerable than usual, and certainly you don't want to get bothered by things like smoke, pollutants, other things like that. And the moon is making a square to the sun, so that in Taurus, so that does indicate that you have to be a little bit careful. In fact, the sun is starting to make a square to Uranus. Now, that square between the sun and Uranus is not going to be exact for another 6 days, nearly a week, but you might be slowly starting to feel it. So, watch your throat, don't shout, don't, whatever activities that might strain your throat, shouting, singing, smoky environment, whatever it is, or if you've got relevant allergies, watch out for that. But so that's an area that you should perhaps make a special effort to address. But in general, Sagittarius, it's a time when you don't have to be doing anything in a dramatic, overt way, and if you can stay at home, preparing things, just knowing that things are getting better. Capricorn. The moon is moving through Taurus. Taurus is a sign that works very well with Capricorn. I mean, it's your Taurus. It's your fellow Earth sign, and that means that you'll be able to work away at whatever you want to work away at, and you'll be very satisfied with what you're doing, and there will be a certain amount of talent and creativity involved. And you can do things differently, and you may even be able to surprise yourself, and also surprise other people perhaps. So it's important that you give yourself the chance to do something which might in its own way be quite wonderful and praiseworthy. And you might have your doubts, does anyone care? But it doesn't matter if other people care. I mean, the point is you're doing something that is completely in accord with who you are, and you're able to put a lot of energy into it. I mean, you do have a lot of energy at the moment, and it's just important that you're able to channel this energy correctly. You put it into something that is important, and also that is tangible. I mean, tangibility is important to many Capricorns. It's not enough to have just some concept. It just has to be something that it can be touched, that is real. And so maybe that's something that you really want to consider. And at the same time, Capricorn, you have a certain objectivity to you at the moment. You're not going to get caught up on any one thing, and there may be things going on which under normal circumstances could make you angry, but today you're able to get a certain sense of perspective. I mean, maybe it's not just today, maybe it's this week. You can get a sense of perspective. So in spite of your potential for feeling angry and annoyed by what people are doing, by the way the world is going, you just get a perspective, and you kind of get a sense of what you can do and what you can't do, and you're not going to get annoyed for nothing. And that might emphasize Capricorn's fundamental practicality. Annoyance, irritation in themselves don't achieve anything, and for most of us that's very difficult to recognize. We do get caught up in knots of anger, and it can bring us to a standstill, but for you just accept the situation, and you then work out, well, what needs to be done. And that does make you very practical and also very useful. And so, Capricorn, you're a great person to have around for dealing with problems, dealing with irritations. If other people lose their objectivity, well, not you. You're not losing your objectivity at all. And also, you're not losing your sense of humour. I think that you have a good sense of humour at the moment, and you're not going to allow anything to get you down. So, in many cases, you're almost, I'm not saying you're bulletproof literally, but you are fairly bulletproof today. You are protected, and at the same time, you're not being defensive. And that is something really good. You don't give the impression of doing everything you can to protect yourself from whatever's going on around you. No, you just come over as being fairly relaxed, but very with it. And so Capricorn, we need to have people like you around, and your calmness, but at the same time your seriousness, and also it's not just you're calm, you're serious, you're creative. So it's a good day, Capricorn. Aquarius, it's a first quarter moon. We had a new moon on January the 29th, new moon in Aquarius, and now the moon has moved on. So we now have the sun in Aquarius and the moon in Taurus. So the first quarter moon, in some respects, is a call for action. It is a time when the lunar cycle is sufficiently developed for you to understand what is actually happening. And with the moon in Taurus, the action needs to take place at quite a fundamental level. And it's about the home, it's about your foundations, it's maybe about your family, and getting the right balance and not taking things too far, but also appreciating that if you want to make progress in the future, you do have to make sure the foundations are really secure. And so thinking forward to the next new moon. So there is a new moon in Pisces at the end of February. So thinking forward to that, you might be thinking, how are you going to move from now to end of February? How's it all going to come together? How are you going to make the most of this lunar cycle? And your first job is to consider the basics. And today we don't just have the first quarter moon, we have the moon making a conjunction to Uranus. And so when you think about what is important to you, what gives you stability, then you might have to accept that a certain amount of change is required, sort of fundamental change. And it might be that you have to talk to members of your family, people who you live with, maybe some change in domestic routines, the way the home is organized, your attitude to home, your attitude to land. That could also be part of it, depending on your situation. But considering that change, is something that I do think is important. Being an Aquarius, it's easy to think in terms of ideas. I mean, Aquarius is an ideas sign, and it's also a fixed sign. And what is fixity? What is the most fixed thing that can be? Well, it is going back to that earth on which you stand. And so, ideas on their own don't mean much. They need to be grounded, and this is something that you can do. And in the process, quite a few changes might be required of you, but it's all for the best, and that's perhaps how best to deal with this first quarter moon. And I think that by and large you should be able to take this all in your stride. You are capable of a certain amount of objectivity. Things might annoy you, but I don't think you're going to get too angry. You're able to see the broader picture and understand that annoyance, irritation, anger, it's not worth the effort. And you're able to maintain your objectivity, regardless of what the pressures are. And you also recognize that you're in a position where you can make a lot happen in a very short period of time. So it's important, perhaps, Aquarius, that you're able to just pack it in. You focus on on what matters, you isolate what matters, and then you just give it everything you've got. And At the same time, Aquarius, we have got Venus moving into Aries. Well, Venus was in Aries yesterday. I mean, in this video, I'm going to be talking a lot more about Venus in Aries. But the advantage of Venus in Aries for you at the moment is that you will be able to tell people what's on your mind. I think you're going to be able to communicate with a certain amount of power and vigor, and you're not going to want to keep things to yourself. And it might well be, but some of the things you say do have a slightly destabilizing impact. But I think it's in a positive way. You do understand that things have to be stirred up a little. I mean, if you allow the foundations of your life to stay put and not to be changed, those foundations, might get rotten, and sometimes things do need to be aired out a little, and that is something you can do. And one way of doing that is through the things you say, and it might well be the case with Venus in Aries that you can point things out. You just become aware of things, and once you become aware of something, you feel that it needs to be talked about. And Venus is making an opposition to true black moon Lilith, and so with Venus opposition true black moon Lilith, it's about the darkness, you could say, with true black moon Lilith. It could be about ideas which on the surface seem threatening, but ideas which perhaps can be incorporated into your everyday life, and it's about accepting the world as it is, and not trying to sugarcoat it, trying to pretend that everything is fine. Just being able to accept that darkness and almost make it part of your world. And not everyone can do that, but I think because of who you are, I think that's something that you can manage to do. And just bear in mind what your main goal is. You're trying to give yourself grounding and stability, and in order to give yourself grounding and stability, very often it's necessary to accept the darkness, to accept that things are just not always straightforward. And if you accept things, then they become part of you, and they don't become a threat anymore. In fact, they can actually be something which can support you. Pisces, Jupiter is now stationary direct. Jupiter went stationary direct yesterday, and so I'm hoping that this Jupiter stationary is now making its influence felt in terms of giving you a sense of security. I mean, that's part of what it is. Finding security, having security, and Jupiter stationary direct reminds you that perhaps that's what it's all about. When you think about what you've been trying to achieve since, I don't know, last summer, May of last year, when Jupiter went into Gemini, that's now something you can work on further, and there's no need anymore to think that, things are too complicated, things are too confusing, people are changing their minds all the time. That kind of instability is, I believe, something of the past. And while this is happening, you have an ability to be clear in terms of what you're saying and what you're thinking. With the moon in Taurus, moon in Taurus, it's an earth sign, and so moon in Taurus allows you to be down to earth, but also to communicate in a down to earth way. Sometimes Pisces can use language which is a bit complicated, and you're not quite sure what you mean, and other people are certainly not sure what you mean or what you want, but they don't know. But now, with the moon in Taurus, you can make things clear. You can make things which are hidden clear. And this moon in Taurus, it's a first quarter moon. So with a first quarter moon, it might have felt, over the last week that there was something you were trying to reveal, you were trying to get out into the open, but you weren't entirely committed to it, and part of you wanted to keep it secret, and now you have a chance to say what's on your mind, and you shouldn't be afraid of it. And it may be that some people will respond in a negative way, but does that matter? The moon is conjunct Uranus. That perhaps is about you being able to create a certain amount of shock by what you say. But the moon is not just conjunct Uranus. The moon is also sextile Saturn. And so with moon sextile Saturn, Pisces, you can create an environment where there is a sense of stability. You can lay the foundations for your next step. So you lay the foundations, and then you say what you have to say, and so you kind of shockproof things. And so some of your ideas, they are quite radical. Some of your observations, but I think, Pisces, it's important that you don't hold back, and you shouldn't be worried about causing offence or causing there being a surprise. I wouldn't worry about that at all. And looking at the heliocentric picture, we still have Mercury opposition Mars, and that Mercury opposition Mars is a little bit tense, but it's more about other people's tension than your tension, and it just may be that you're just very aware of how tense some people are, and perhaps how tense the society we live in is. I suggested that this Mercury opposition Mars is all about these big words being spoken by politicians. Whether it's Trump or Trudeau or what's going on in China. People do have to say things in a spectacular way and in a slightly aggressive way, and that's something you're perhaps picking up on more than usual. And it may also reflect not just in your communications, but also in other people's communications. So some of the people around you may be saying things which are dramatic, which might even sound a little bit threatening, but it's posturing. And so don't overinterpret other people's posturings. People do like to say dramatic things, but do they really mean it? Well, not necessarily. And now I want to consider today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. And I asked the question, what is Wednesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was a hexagram I got yesterday, which is hexagram number 27, which is the corners of the mouth. And it doesn't move. No moving lines. And that might indicate that there's not a great deal happening today. I mean, astrologically, if you look at the aspects, at least the aspects from the perspective of London time, Greenwich Mean Time, there are some lunar aspects. It's first quarter moon, but there's nothing massively noteworthy, and that may say something about today. So regardless of all of the dramas I might have sometimes been suggesting in my forecast of the 12 signs, maybe fundamentally it's today could be something of a damp squib, maybe, or it just might feel that nothing is ready yet. I mean, maybe the action is very much in the future, it's in the past, and we're just having a temporary respite here. But if we try to interpret the corners of the mouth, and again, I did talk about the corners of the mouth yesterday. The corners of the mouth is about what we say, and so the words we use today could be very important, and also the words we hear. And so when we listen to what people say, we're perhaps getting a window into their soul, or at least a window into their motivations. So don't ignore the words. Words matter. And we should therefore be very careful about our own words, because if we say anything today, we are revealing who we are. And it may or may not be the case that other people who hear our words may be able to judge who we are and what we can do, what our motivations are. So we do have to be careful in that sense. But corners of the mouth may also be about in terms of what we eat. So nutrition, food do matter. And so if you want to change your diet, or you want to maybe give something up or start eating something new, now might be the time to be thinking about it. You don't actually have to act on it, because the corners of the mouth it's not moving. And in fact, if you look at the nuclear hexagram in corners of the mouth, if you take off the top line and you take off the bottom line, you're left with 4 broken lines. So the nuclear hexagram of 27, the corners of the mouth, is hexagram 2, which is the receptive. And that's the underlying picture. We just have to watch, respond, and we don't have to respond at all. We just have to watch, observe. And that is very much the emphasis today. We are watching what other people are doing. We are listening to what other people are saying. And are we the subject or the object? It may be, that other people are watching us. They're listening to what we say, and they are drawing conclusions. And with the corners of the mouth, it is absolutely not a good time to be taking on anything new. Absolutely not. As I think I said yesterday, we've got enough on our plate. And so anything new is just going to overwhelm us. And really, that's as simple as it is. I'm not really forecasting anything here. I'm just giving you some general concepts about what today is like. And overall, I don't think it's going to be particularly dramatic. And now I want to look at Venus in Aries. I know Venus went into Aries yesterday, but I wanted to talk about other stuff yesterday. I wanted to talk about the economy, and I wanted to talk about Jupiter going stationary direct. So now might be a good time to look at Venus moving into Aries. So here is the chart, if you're interested, for the moment that Venus moved into Aries, sort of London time. So London time went into Aries at 7:57 yesterday, February the 4th. And so, what does it mean for Venus to be in Aries? And, one way of looking at Venus moving into Aries is to say, well, it was in Pisces. And so Venus is just a planet moving into the fire signs. And so, as I've been saying to a lot of the 12 signs, this does give us fire. If there hasn't been any fire around, okay, the moon does occasionally go into fire signs every now and then, but it doesn't stay in fire signs. Now we've got Venus here in Aries, and that is something perhaps fortunate in the sense that it allows us to make connections. There's an increasing level of excitement and fire. We need fire. If there's no fire, there's nothing. It's just everything starts to feel a bit empty and flat. I mean, that is a possibility if you have long periods without anything in fire signs. But the problem with Venus in Aries is that Venus is in its detriment in Aries, because Venus rules Libra. So Venus in Aries can be about inappropriate action, being too pushy. And Venus is also, it is the planet of beauty and what one looks like, and it's the planet of money. It can be about spending money on cosmetic surgery. It can be about spending money on clothes. Beautiful. It can be about spending money on beautiful things. And with Venus moving into Aries, there is a danger that money is not well spent. And yeah, if you're having non-essential plastic surgery, how well is it going to work out? I'm sure it'll be fine, but it's just one thing to consider, isn't it? Venus moving into Aries is not suggestive of successful plastic surgery. I mean, but I'm sure if you did any statistics on it, plastic surgery done while Venus in Aries would all go fine. But if you have the choice, you wouldn't want to have plastic surgery when Venus is in Aries. And likewise, doing something relating to to beauty or what things look like, buying expensive clothes while Venus is in Aries, or decorating your house when Venus is in Aries, and you think it looks great, and that could be a thing about Venus in Aries. One's aesthetic judgment might be undermined. So something might look great, might look absolutely beautiful while Venus is in Aries, but later on you realize it doesn't actually look so great. It might be ugly, it might be tasteless, but it might not seem like it at the time. So that is a problem with Venus in Aries. Now, Venus is doing all sorts of things. So Venus moves into Aries. That's the first point. And Venus is slowing down. And Venus goes retrograde on March the 2nd. So Venus goes through Aries, and it's slowing down, and it gets March the 2nd. It goes retrograde. I think it goes retrograde at around 10 degrees Aries. That's when it goes retrograde, March the 2nd. Yes, it goes retrograde at around 10:50 Aries. And during that period, during March, there are going to be no, that's not true. That's so during March, as it goes retrograde, there will be a period when it is in mutual reception to the Sun by exaltation. So when is the Sun and Venus in mutual reception with the Sun? Well, actually on February the 18th. Sorry, I got that wrong. On February the 18th, the Sun goes into Pisces. So I've said that Venus is in a poor position because it's in its detriment. And so anything to do with Venus, like the symbolism of Venus, like anything to do with beauty and so on, should be avoided. But on February the 18th, Venus's position improves. And that's because the Sun moves into Pisces. So the Sun will be in mutual reception with Venus by exaltation. So if you want to do anything that's aesthetically important, and you feel there's no hurry, it absolutely has to be done, then you could say, well, there's a window perhaps between, I don't know, February the 18th and March the 2nd, when Venus is not retrograde and it's in mutual reception to the Sun. Then on March the 2nd, that's when Venus's position really does start to deteriorate further, and it goes backwards. And then, March the 27th, Venus goes retrograde so far that it moves back into Pisces. And so Venus goes back into its sign of exaltation. Okay, it will be conjunct Skeet, the fixed star connected with accidents and disasters, but it still will be exalted. And then it goes back, and then on April the 13th, Venus in Pisces goes stationary direct. Then April the 30th, it moves back into Aries. So Venus will be in Aries in April. I mean, that's That's kind of quite amazing. And in fact, April 30th. So this is a really long process, and then finally May the 16th, Venus will return to where it was when it went retrograde on March the 2nd. So it went retrograde on March the 2nd at 10 degrees 50 Aries, and so on May the 16th, Venus will again be at 10 degrees Aries. So that's when the whole cycle is completed, you could say. And then on June the 6th, Venus moves into Taurus. So I'm sorry to give this great long list, but I just wanted to sort of emphasize the point that Venus is doing all kinds of stuff, and it's not always necessarily particularly fortunate. And Venus is a benefic. And so, when you've got a benefic under pressure, that could be that could be difficult. It's in terms of generally people's optimism, and so with Venus moving into Aries now, and certainly between now and February the 18th, when because Venus. When the Sun goes into Pisces on February the 18th, and the Sun and Venus are in mutual reception. So there is an improvement there. But between now and February the 18th, when Venus isn't really in a particularly good position, there may be an increasing level of pessimism. And we might be aware of this, and this might relate to the world and people's views about business and global growth. So that might feed into the markets. On the other hand, Jupiter is improving. The condition of Jupiter is not going to get any worse now that Jupiter is stationary direct. Now, what if you have got Venus in Aries in your natal chart? Now, if you've got Venus in Aries in your natal chart, you have to live with it all the time. And to an extent, you get used to living with it, and you work on it. And you find the best way of accommodating it. So having Venus in Aries isn't really a problem. Though I suppose you can see the disadvantages of having Venus in Aries, and that's why I think it might be a good idea to look at a few people who do have Venus in Aries, famous people who have Venus in Aries, to get some idea about how it might be working. Now, the first person I want to look at is not actually a real person, and this might indicate that Venus in Aries is quite a good thing. And the launch of Barbie, I have looked at this chart before, but Barbie was launched when Venus was in Aries at a toy show in New York on March 9th, 1959. And this perhaps says a lot about Venus in Aries. Venus represents the female form, and the female form in the form of a toy gets launched while Venus is in Aries. Now, if you were an astrologer advising the toy company, I can't remember what toy company it was it Mattel? I'm not sure. Advising them on the launch of a toy, you might say, avoid Venus in Aries. Venus in Aries, that is that's not going to work, is it? Because it's a toy. It's not just a toy. It's a doll. There's a feminine, and Venus in Aries. How's that going to work? But Venus is in mutual reception to the Sun. So when you've got Venus in Aries, Sun in Pisces, that does make all the difference. And I've noticed this, again and again. When you get a mutual reception between Sun and Venus, it does make all the difference. And so you could say that Venus in Aries mutual reception with the Sun by exaltation was a very good time for Barbie to make her debut. And notice also that toy exhibition on March 9th, 1959 was at a new moon. And again, that emphasizes the point that a new moon is a good time to be starting things. And so I would have said Venus in Aries, the launch of of a doll representing the female form, that fits to my mind. So that's an example of Venus in Aries, and you could say quite a fortunate example of Venus in Aries. And another woman who has Venus in Aries, I don't know, is Barbie a woman? However you want to describe Barbie. Maybe Barbie is just a concept. Is the wife of Emmanuel Macron. So she has Venus in Aries, and with her, her Venus is it's in its detriment. It's conjunct the Sun, but she has a Sun in Aries, and this this may just indicate the assertiveness of Venus in Aries. She's got Venus opposition Saturn. That Venus is really under a lot of pressure. Yet it also is not just about the assertiveness, but the selfishness. Here is the drama teacher who was prepared to have an affair with her pupil, Emmanuel Macron, and Venus in Aries. This is what Venus wanted to do. That's Venus in Aries. She felt that it was the right thing to do at the time, and it seems she was fairly unapologetic about it. And I think that the potential selfishness about Venus in Aries, and she was going to get her way, and the concept of a moral problem about a teacher-pupil relationship, even if it was a sort of former teacher, but there was still a power relationship, and Venus in Aries didn't apologize about it at all. So that is perhaps a negative way of seeing Venus in Aries, but you could say worked well for her. She married the future president of France. Who knows what would have happened if she hadn't? Maybe that relationship in some way helped him develop as a person and put him in a position to become president of France. I mean, being president of France, it's quite difficult to become president of France, and a lot of things have to go your way if you want to become president of France. And maybe at some level, having this Emmanuel Macron having his relationship with a much older woman was one of the reasons he became president of France. I don't know. And Dana International was someone I looked at very recently, also known as Sharon Cohen. Dana International she was involved in the Eurovision Song Contest. She did very well. She was this Israeli, originally an Israeli man who had a sex change operation, and there is Venus in Aries. So the Venus principle is very important for her or him before the change. So Venus in Aries. So Venus, you could see Venus here as being quite archetypal and on the Aries point. And it's opposition Uranus, and it's conjunct the North Node. So you can imagine how Venus conjunct the North Node in Aries might encourage someone to be thinking about gender, particularly as Venus conjunct the North Node is opposition Uranus. And I suppose Venus is also about the arts and music, someone who was very successful. I don't know what Sharon Cohen or Dana International is doing at the moment, but I think that is a good illustration of how Venus in Aries might be working. And going to the United States, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So she is a Republican congresswoman who is known for being very outspoken and certainly a big fan of Trump. And she has she's born on May the 27th, 1974, and she has Venus in Aries, Venus square Mars, and actually Mars square Chiron, because there's been a Mars square Chiron recently over the last couple of days, and so maybe Marjorie Taylor Greene is picking up on this Mars square Chiron. But with that Venus in Aries conjunct Chiron, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a lot of people obviously can't stand Marjorie Taylor Greene. They regard her as being as obnoxious or whatever, but of course she has her fans on the right. I have no opinion on Marjorie Taylor Greene, by the way. But with that Venus conjunct Chiron, Venus in Aries, she is encouraged to do things differently, to rock the boat, to, I think, did she interrupt Joe Biden's State of the Union speech, I think, and wasn't she wearing a MAGA hat or something, but that would be Venus conjunct Aries, conjunct Chiron, wanting to be the maverick, wanting to do things differently, and not perhaps caring who she offends. And talking about offence on a sort of on the other end of the political spectrum, there's this actress Rachel Ziegler, who, one of these people I don't really know anything about, don't really care much about, but I'm not interested. But she is in the news, and she's in the news for her political statements. She's a Disney actress, and she had this part in this Snow White film, and this Snow White film was criticized for being woke, and she made these statements. She made these statements how she didn't regard herself as wanting to be a princess being rescued by a prince. That's not how she saw the Snow White story. And she's radically pro-Palestinian and anti-Trump. She said, what did she say about Trump? She said, may Trump supporters and Trump voters and Trump himself never know peace. I mean, you can say that if you're a politician, but if you're a Disney actress, you don't say that kind of thing, because half your audience are going to be Trump supporters, so you don't want to alienate half your audience. But if you've got Venus in Aries, like Rachel Ziegler has, there's her Venus in Aries. Where's her Venus in Aries gone? There's her Venus at 4 degrees Aries, so she's coming up for her Venus return. If you've got Venus in Aries, well, you can't help yourself, can you? And that Venus, remember, that Venus is not projected. In a male chart, it might be projected, but if it's Venus in Aries in a female chart, that's who you are, and that's what you represent. And so it's very personal to her, and so she's just using it. And looking at that Venus in Aries, it's interesting that her Venus in Aries, well, it is sextile Saturn. I mean, that Venus sextile Saturn probably helps in terms of her being an actress. I mean, if you look at her, that Venus in Aries conjunct the midheaven, for an actress, that's probably a good place for Venus to be, and it's sextile Saturn, so that does give a certain amount of control and poise and discipline as any actress would need, I think. But it is a problem at Venus. It's not in neutral reception with the Sun. It's not in neutral reception with the Mars. And notice she's got Mars conjunct Chiron, exact Mars conjunct Chiron, and Marjorie Taylor Greene had Venus conjunct Chiron and Mars conjunct Chiron. Mars is quite an aggressive planet, and so Mars conjunct Chiron, she says what's on her mind. That's how she asserts herself. One way she asserts herself, and she wants to be different. She wants to be a maverick. It's not the right thing to do for a Disney actress to give her opinions on Trump and Palestine, but no, she really can't help herself with that Mars conjunct Chiron. Venus in Aries can encourage you to do things which may be self-destructive, but if something has to be done, it has to be done. And certainly if in a female chart, Venus in Aries, it's not projected, and it's who she is. So the chart of Sophie Scholl, who was executed by the Nazis for putting up distributing anti-Nazi propaganda in Munich. She had a Venus in Aries. So, there's her Venus in Aries. So you can very simply say she has Venus in Aries. This is who she is. It's not projected. She's an Aries. If she wants to do something, she's just going to do it. And if something isn't right, then she has to say something about it. Now, I suppose you saw that with Rachel Ziegler, but Rachel Ziegler was not really taking any risks except for perhaps undermining her reputation with Disney. I mean, in the case of Sophie Scholl, of course, she was risking her life, and she paid. She paid the price. She was executed for just expressing her opinions, and she was completely unrepentant in court. I'm guessing that when she was in court, if she had been completely repentant and if she had said sorry and all this kind, I mean, the Nazis wouldn't really have wanted to have executed her. I don't think so. It's not really very good for the system. They would have probably executed her brother, but maybe if she'd been repentant, she could have saved her life, and she'd tried to put the blame on her brother and all that if she had done it. But no, Venus in Aries was just going to do what she was going to do, and so she was executed. And so that's Venus in Aries, and how Venus in Aries can work, and there can therefore be a certain sense of sacrifice with Venus in Aries. So far I've just talked about women with Venus in Aries, and I was going to sort of divide it up and look at some men with Venus in Aries. I don't want to spend too much time looking at men with Venus in Aries simply because I'm sort of running out of time a bit here. But one person I wanted to look at with Venus in Aries to get an idea about the different ways in which Venus in Aries can work is Beau Biden. So Beau Biden was one of Joe Biden's son. He was a son who died of a brain tumor, and Beau Biden has Venus opposition Uranus. And how do we see that? You could, if you wanted, try to pin the brain tumor onto Venus in Aries opposition Uranus. Your argument would be that Aries represents the head, Venus is in Aries, therefore it's, that's not good. That's not a good place for Venus, and it's opposition Uranus. I'm not saying I would put that argument. I'm just putting it as a suggestion. And Venus is opposition Jupiter, and I suppose you could associate Jupiter with growth, with Cancer, maybe. But that's one way of looking at his Venus opposition Jupiter, Venus opposition Uranus. And I absolutely don't want to make any associations here between Venus in Aries and brain tumors or Venus opposition Jupiter and Cancer. I'm looking at a chart with 2020 hindsight, and I'm reading too much into it. What I would want to say about Beau Biden's chart is that Venus opposition Uranus, Venus is a male chart, represents the feminine, and in particular represents his mother. And his mother was killed in a car crash in December 1972. So Joe Biden's first wife had this crash in which Beau and Hunter Biden were aboard, and a daughter who was killed in the crash. And so Beau Biden had Venus opposition Uranus. Hunter Biden had in his chart Mars opposition Uranus. So there's Mars opposition Uranus. Hunter Biden has Mars exactly opposition Uranus. Now, you could say that Mars opposition Uranus in Hunter Biden's chart says something about his behavior, and I'm sure it does. But what was the initial trauma that may have driven that behavior? And that initial trauma was arguably his mother dying in a car crash. And so Mars opposition Uranus, not just his mother dying in a car crash, his sister dying in a car crash, and himself getting really seriously injured. So Hunter Biden has the Mars opposition Uranus, and Beau Biden had the Venus opposition Uranus. And so that is one aspect of Venus conjunct Venus in Aries. And Venus in Aries might also, in certain cases, represent a difficulty communicating. And so, what happens when one wants to communicate, one can't communicate, but we feel that things are wrong. Venus in the male chart can still be about someone who wants to take the initiative, wants to take action, perhaps if something is wrong. And recently we had the case of Luigi Mangione, who assassinated the insurance company boss, United Healthcare, was his name, Brian Thompson. And Luigi Mangione he's still alive, of course, he's in prison. I don't have his time of birth. So Luigi Mangione has Venus in Aries, and so with Luigi Venus in Aries, that may say something about why he got himself into this situation where he became an assassin. I mean, there are things that upset him. That's Venus in Aries. He also has Mercury in Aries, Saturn in Aries. He had Venus trine Pluto. It may say something about relationships, and so that's a possible motivation. I mean, because I know that he was under a lot of pressure from health, and he had back issues, and that may be one of the reasons why he attacked the head of this insurance company CEO. But he had Venus in Aries, and Venus in Aries might just represent some frustrations, because there can be something frustrating about Venus in Aries, because it is in its detriment. And you don't normally associate Venus in Aries with taking this kind of action, but maybe you should. And he is not the only American. I don't know how you want to see him. If you want to see him as a terrorist, or however you want to see him, he's not the only person who felt so badly about things that he had to do something. Someone else was Ted Kaczynski. Ted Kaczynski was the Unabomber, and he sent these boxes, elaborately done boxes, with bombs to universities and so forth, and people died because of it, because he was angry about what was going on in society. And he also had major problems dealing with other people. I think he was on the autistic spectrum. I mean, in spite of being a genius, being a math PhD and professor. So that Venus in Aries square Mars, you see that Venus square Mars, you can see the anger there. And what does he do with the anger? Venus in Aries, he does the only thing he feels he can do, and that may say something about him as someone who plants bombs or sends bombs. I mean, I have to think about this more, about what Venus in Aries actually means. But there can be a destructive side to it, but it's a side that it is destructive but also highly principled. And of course, in the case of Sophie Scholl, she was highly principled. She wasn't a terrorist. She didn't blow things up. She just put up some posters. But there may be this feeling with Venus in Aries of total sort of injustice, and you have to do something about it. And so if you look at something, the people we've looked at with Venus in Aries, there seems to be a similar impulse here. And another American terrorist, not the only American terrorist, that we've had two American terrorists. So Timothy McVeigh had Venus in Aries. Venus in Aries, conjunct Saturn, conjunct the North Node. Again, same situation. He saw what was going on in Waco. It's not about whether he was right or wrong. It's his subjective impression. He saw, what was it, Koresh, that compound in Waco, being invaded by federal agents. He thought the government was out to get him, was not just out to get him, but out to get people like him. It was all an issue of freedom. Venus in Aries, he felt he had to do something about it, and he wasn't able to communicate in other ways. So he felt that blowing things up was, all he could do. That was the right thing to do. And Timothy McVeigh was born on the same day as Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes, obviously different centuries. When you make the switch from Gregorian to Julian, so Guy Fawkes was the man who attempted to blow up the Houses of Parliament in 1605. So here is the horoscope of Guy Fawkes. And Guy Fawkes also had Venus in Aries. He didn't like the fact that England was not a Catholic country, but it was ruled by Protestants, and he thought he wanted to somehow bring back Catholicism. Venus in Aries, Venus widely opposition Saturn in Aries, so he felt he had no choice. His Venus was trine Mars, so he got some gunpowder together and tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament. It failed, maybe because the gunpowder was wet, and he was had a fairly horrible death. He was tortured and then hanged. He was supposed to be drawn and quartered, but in a way, fortunately for him, he was hanged. But before he was drawn and quartered, he died. So he didn't actually go through the whole horror of being hanged, drawn, and quartered. But he had Venus in Aries, and so he felt he did what he had to do. So this is an aspect of Venus in Aries that perhaps we need to think more about, but is not immediately obvious. So that's it. That's all I want to say about Venus in Aries. I hope you found this video of some interest. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be extremely grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.